Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Let's look at the top headlines today. Massive landslides in Kerala's Wayanad killed over 50 people while several others are missing. Rescue efforts by the NDRF, army and local officials have been hindered by bad weather. Star shooter Manu Bhakar becomes the first Indian to win 2 medals in a single Olympics. She won bronze in the Paris Olympics women's 10-meter air pistol event as well as in the 10-meter air pistol mixed team event with Sarabjot Singh. Prime Minister Modi expressed confidence that India would become the world's third largest economy during his third term, given the country's current growth rate of 8%. He was speaking at the CII's post-budget conference. At least 18 coaches of the Mumbai-Howrah Mail derailed in Jharkhand, killing 2 and injuring several others. This follows at least 3 goods trains' recent derailments in Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and West Bengal. Union Minister Piyush Goyal announced that India is not reconsidering its stance on Chinese FDI despite the economic survey's recommendations. He said the survey's recommendations do not influence government policy. The Department of Personnel and Training has issued trainee IAS officer Pooja Khedkar a show-cause notice. She has until the 2nd of August to respond to the fake certificates and misuse of power allegations against her. The Supreme Court granted bail to NCP leader Nawab Malik in a money laundering case. The bail granted on medical grounds will be valid till the disposal of his regular bail plea before the Bombay High Court. Meanwhile, protests have erupted in Venezuela amid allegations of poll rigging. President Nicolas Maduro claimed victory in the elections, but opposition leaders labeled the result as fraudulent, alleging that Edmundo Gonzalez won with 73.2% of the votes. The men's swimming triathlon at the Paris Olympics has been postponed to the 31st of July due to high pollution levels in the River Seine. The announcement came just hours before the race was scheduled to start on the 30th of July. India has its traditional ties with Russia and a growing strategic partnership with the United States. It's now having to walk a tightrope as it navigates its relations with both these prominent powers which are in an adversarial relationship. Now, Prime Minister Modi has just visited Russia. Now, there are talks that he is likely to visit Ukraine later this year. And in the ongoing Quad meeting of foreign ministers being held in Tokyo, India has positioned the Quad as the cornerstone of a free and open Indo-Pacific, a region it says it's increasingly under threat from China's aggressive actions. So what we're asking tonight is, why did India join the Quad in expressing its deepest concerns over the war raging in Ukraine and respect for territorial integrity? Something that questions Russia's role in the conflict. Can New Delhi deepen its relationship with the West while keeping its ties with Russia intact? Why does India need the Quad? How does Russia and China's so-called no-limits partnership impact ties with India? Why is Prime Minister Modi now visiting Ukraine? To talk about this, I have with me here in the News9 Plus studio Ambassador Manju Seth, Adit Kothari and my colleague Justin Thomas in the studio here with me. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. I want to start by asking you this, Ambassador Seth. Prime Minister Modi's visited Moscow a few days ago, historic state visit, warmly welcomed by President Putin. And now there's talk of him visiting Ukraine. Is this an example of India trying very hard to balance both the East and the West camps?
Absolutely, it is, an attempt to do that. And I think that is, that balancing serves India's best interests. And I think the visit to Russia, as we saw, was very keenly commented on and looked at by other capitals around the world. And now the Ukraine visit will also similarly be, I think, an eye will be kept on it and will be watched carefully, though it has not been confirmed as yet. But I think it is one more step in India's endeavor to ensure that its interests are protected at all times, and also it sees itself being able to play a role and a role in world on global affairs. I think so. That is again going to be an important visit if it does take place, because he has just been to Russia, and I believe that there would have been discussions on the ending the Ukraine war, and in some time back there were sort of comments President Putin was quoted as saying that they want the war to end, but they want to negotiate. And so I think they are also, there's a fatigue around the war. Everybody wants peace. And so I think Ukraine wants peace too, and Russia too wants peace. Everybody wants this war to end. But on whose terms will that peace be found? I think that is going to be the biggest setback, or the biggest impediment to finding a lasting and permanent solution. And I think this visit, if it does take place in Ukraine, it is likely that PM Modi would convey, Putin's concerns, President Putin's Russia's concerns, and see how both sides can come to the negotiating table and to find a solution to end the war, not carry on, the way they have been doing at negotiations.
Right. Adit Kothari, I want to ask you this. Does India have the clout to be a peacemaker, to play peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine? Do you possibly think that's one of the reasons why Prime Minister Modi is going to Ukraine later this year?
So I don't think Prime Minister Modi is actually going to Ukraine to be that peacemaker. Why he's going there is predominantly to pander to the US interests, which actually want him to become the peacemaker. Because, as Jake Sullivan also mentioned, during his visit to India, that nobody likes a ally or a Western ally to go into Moscow and be seen hugging Putin. So that clearly is where they have drawn the line. They've demonstrated their disdain and their strong protest against Mr. Modi's visit to Russia. And I think it's some sort of a monkey balancing where Mr. Narendra Modi is being seen as that one leader who has reached both to Ukraine and Russia, and has previously been seen as somebody who has been comfortable talking to Putin about ending the war. So that's where I would put the situation at, where this is just for the gallery. I don't think Mr. Modi has that kind of clout, or India has that kind of clout at this juncture to actually end this war. To end this war, you would essentially need both Ukraine and Russia to come onto the same table and mitigate all the differences, which is not happening and which India is not being able to facilitate.
Right, absolutely. So Adit Kothari believes that it's more of a photo op, Justin. We've seen a lot of photo ops of late. And of course, Prime Minister Modi has, in the past 2 years back, called for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. But there doesn't seem to be a possibility of that happening this time around. This is more like balancing with a photograph.
I think what the West and the East knows, that India is in a very unique position, where they are in good relationship with both sides. So West has clearly indicated to India that you need to step up and show from your side, okay, we'll give you support, we'll help you out when it comes to China, but you also need to do your part and play a role in that. And the Russians also understand the fact, the situation that India is in, and in the recent meetings also they had made very clear that they understood that when India took stand in United Nations, and sometimes they didn't take part in that, and Russia understood that. So I believe that Russia also understands India's unique position. So allowing, if there is a possibility, even a speck of possibility, because I believe Modi is a personality whom I don't think would be just a photo op kind of situation going to Ukraine, because I believe he needs to
wants some deliverables.
Exactly, deliverables that he needs to put it out in front of the world. Yes, I have done this, and that plays to his constituents, his character. So I believe it might not be, but it will be a push forward towards where these two sides can come, because anyways they have made it clear, Russia has made it clear what they require from Ukraine, which is non-negotiable.
Yes.
So anything around that Modi can help out could be playing a role. Nothing more than that.
Nothing
probably.
more than that. So there would be a visit, but with some deliverables. There would be some tangibles that India would want from that visit to Ukraine, though one doesn't know what that could be at this moment. But I want to ask Ambassador Seth, this statement that came out of Tokyo, Ambassador Seth, the Quad foreign ministers meeting, very interesting wording there, that the Quad foreign ministers have expressed their deepest concerns over the war raging in Ukraine and respect for territorial integrity. It's possibly one of the strongest statements that India has signed off on when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Why does India really need the Quad? Tell us why it's so important for us to be part of this quadrilateral of democracies, as it's called.
At what is happening around the world and how, if China especially is laying claim to other people's territories and is trying to bulldoze and to frighten smaller countries, and we saw what happened with the Philippines recently in the South China Sea, and in all regions it's trying to to sort of assert itself and to send messages to the smaller countries, and including to India and the US, that it can and will control sea lines of communication if necessary. So it's every step is in that direction. So that threatens the security of maritime navigation, and India especially, that is a very important sea line, including in the Indian Ocean, where China has built up its sort of bases and is trying to see now how to control and increase its influence across in the Indo-Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, in the South China Sea. Everywhere it is trying to do that, and of course on our borders. So India is definitely feeling a bit threatened, and it needs friends. And in this particular case, India has has agreed, or was keen to join the Quad, because the Quad is, of course, the main focus is on security, but also on many other, in a lot of other areas of cooperation, including joint exercises and including, ensuring that territorial integrity is maintained, not only in the South China Sea, but in the Indian Ocean region, in the Indo-Pacific region, and along our borders. But having said that, I think China is not going to be so easily, contained in a way. But for India, being part of Quad sends a message to China that we are not alone.
Yes.
And we have friends too. And in today's rapidly changing global scenario, global geopolitical shifts that are taking place, it is important to have friends. And I think that is, and also, as very rightly mentioned initially, the balancing has to be there. Though we are not absolutely a very big maritime power or a very big maritime, nation, but we are increasing our capabilities along with the help of our friends, and I feel that this India's being a part of Quad is important for India from many from different perspectives, including, as I said, from the China factor, but also for its own security, and to ensure that there is freedom of navigation, the sea lines of communication are not hampered or are not. Ships are not allowed, are not prevented from from going or from plying in the oceans. So I think we need to. That's why for India it is very important to be part of the Quad. Of course, economic cooperation, and there are many other elements of cooperation. But I think one of these is ensuring open and sort of sea lines of communication, and to send a message to China that it cannot do just what it wants everywhere.
Yes, it has friends. It has important friends in the region. Adit Kothari, do you think would the other Quad nations actually come to India's assistance if, as Ambassador Seth was mentioning, that if there was a standoff with China, how would the Quad activate its this quadrilateral of friendship? How would it play out?
So I'm certainly no oracle to predict whether the Quad would essentially come in to help India at that juncture if there was a proper military standoff between India and China. But what they do present in this scenario is a deterrent. So the partnership between the Quad partners does provide a significant assurance to all the Quad partners, whether it be Japan, United States, India, or Australia, that if China was to act in a certain aggressive or a boisterous manner, that this partnership, which has known to exercise or which has known to demonstrate some sort of joint exercise in the region, has the core capabilities of tackling that Chinese threat. So from that perspective, I think the deterrent factor is extremely important, and that in itself should be mindful for China to take any aggressive steps. Which is why, to my mind, they have not been they have not taken any aggressive steps even towards China, towards Taiwan, which they claim as part of their one China policy. So we have to bear in mind that Taiwan is the sort of apple in the eyes of the Chinese, and India is sort of way down the line. The border between India, the border issues between India and China, way down in the priority line. From that perspective, so I think that in itself should be a bit of a reassuring factor.
Right. That the fact that the border issue between India and China is not a priority anymore, Justin. It seems to be Taiwan, and as long as China's attention, the dragon's attention, is on the Taiwanese apple, as Adit was mentioning, I think India has a few more years, if not a decade or so, to prepare.
So if you compare Taiwan versus the Ladakh region, obviously Taiwan takes center stage. I think that in itself gives us time to prepare, to ensure our forces, our strategic requirements are in place to meet that situation. So India also is in a kind of situation like you are one side you have Quad, and then Russia, which is nudging India and China for the RIC thing,
yes,
to revive it, to bring it into forward. So again, it's a choice that China also has to make at the same time. That do they antagonize the Indians so much that the Russians also find it difficult? Because right now for the China-Russia partnership, China is the senior
dominant partner.
Absolutely. So in that case, yes, while Russia is pushing for that, I think for India right now is to ensure that we are prepared ourselves so that we don't face what Taiwan is facing right now.
Right.
If the situation doesn't come down to that level, that it could be trigger any time right now. So that's what India has to be prepared for.
Yes, absolutely. And meanwhile, the other interesting balancing act that's possibly underway, Justin, is Russia balancing India and China. The fact that it's very good friends with India, but it needs China in the short term, certainly in the next couple of years, given the kind of pressure it's facing from the West. I'm going to ask Ambassador Seth about this. How does Russia balance India and China? It needs both countries. It needs India certainly for the fact that we've been one of the largest buyers of Russian oil in the last couple of years, but also the fact that we are strategic partners, and it looks good to have the world's largest democracy on your corner, as and when Prime Minister Modi meets President Putin, of course. But how much of a balancing act, Ambassador Seth, is it for Russia really, between India and China? Both countries, world's longest disputed boundary, almost 4,000 kilometers. We've had skirmishes 4 years back. How does Russia balance both these very critical relationships?
Yes, they are both critical for Russia, and I think Russia has to do the balancing act in a way that it is able to balance the two, because China would definitely, I feel, put pressure on Russia, given that it's the senior partner. It would, in the relationship, it would try and influence Russia to not support India at crucial moments. But I think Russia also understands that, yes, China is, if you go back a little bit in history, Russia and China were hardly, on talking terms.
Yes.
At some point of time. But their relationship.
They even fought a brief border war in the late 60s.
Yes, so they were not very, have not been very good, should I say, on friendly terms. But given after the Ukraine war, Russia has felt isolated. And plus, it has a lot of trade dependencies with China, like I think most of the world. And so I think that it has to balance that out and ensure that its interests are not compromised. But at the same time, with India, and as you very rightly said, it's the world's biggest democracy, and they would like India to be part on their, to be with them. And India has no option either, because it's a long traditional, relationship which has gone through many, it has hardly gone through many ups and downs. And it has been a very steady relationship. Yes, in between a little bit, but otherwise, at all crucial junctures, they have stood by India. China, and by and large, India has also stood by Russia, as we can see in the Ukraine war and buying their oil, etc. We have ensured that we also balance our relationship. So Russia also needs to do the same, so that China is not able to have the upper hand completely, and vis-a-vis India, and they understand that India and China are not on the best of terms, and we also would not like Russia to be very close to China. Yes. Otherwise, that impacts our interests too. And given the current, the conditions on the, it's of course right now a little lull is there, but their activity continues, and there's just a bridge has been built over the Pangong Lake.
Yes.
And so they're continuing with their activities. They're sort of, should I say, threatening activities towards India continue. And so for Russia understands this, and Russia knows that China will not, will take it'll decide when it has to take a particular action. So it is not going to completely listen to Russia, but it hopes that, that it will be able to secure its interests vis-a-vis India and vis-a-vis China. But with India, since it has had a very long, sort of partnership and relationship, including, of course, a strategic partnership. So I think they will continue to I think, balance, of course, but also I feel they will be supportive towards India even in the future.
Right.
If I may just add one point to this discussion. I was just speaking to a Russian diplomat recently, and I asked him the very same question.
Right.
How do you balance between China and India? And the point that he was making was that, see, from Indian perspective, how do you handle US and Russia?
Yes.
That's how we are handling the situation. Yes, there are challenges. There are a situation where we find ourselves in a spot of bother. But again, diplomacy is all about how do you handle those situations. So that's how we are also handling similar situation. And they understand the fact that there is challenges between India and China. But they're saying that at the same time, we are ensuring that our relationship, which is been on for decades, we care about it, we take it very seriously, and China, while is a growing partner of ours, India remains a solid partner for us.
Absolutely. But I want to ask Adit this question. Adit, this was the Foreign Minister Jaishankar was asked this in Tokyo about whether he sees any third country coming in to play mediator in the border dispute between India and China. But obviously, Russia is the country that's possibly best placed to do this. You see this happening at some point where Russia could actually mediate between India and China to, possibly postpone the border from becoming a hot border, at least in the near term?
So not at this point, predominantly given the kind of ties that India and US are essentially sharing at this point. So I don't see Russia becoming that particular country which would essentially, if, say, for example, if the border was to inflame and become active, I don't think the Russians would be capable or at that position to actually intervene. They are best placed, undoubtedly, because of the proximity that they share with the Chinese and India. And they would be best placed to do it, but I don't foresee them coming to the table because of all the Western hindrances that will be in play. But I think one point that Ambassador Seth made, that resonated with me quite brilliantly. So there was an article in Nikkei Asia about a year or so ago, and it basically said how India saved the West by actually buying Russian oil.
Yes.
Because what they were trying to pivot the narrative around is that had India not been in the picture, then Russia would have been completely thrown into the Chinese arms, thereby making their nexus much stronger and completely inseparable. So there, India played a very critical role in ensuring that, they were able to sort of minimize Russia falling into Chinese arms.
Absolutely, and I think there's a metaphor there, Adit, for what you just mentioned. The fact that while Russia is one of the world's largest oil producers, India is one of the largest oil refiners in the world, and possibly that's a metaphor for the times that we are in right now. That India refining Russian oil and selling it back to Europe and to the West, who don't want to buy it directly from Russia, but they don't mind getting the oil from India. But that's all we have time for this evening. Thank you very much, Adit Kothari, for joining us. Ambassador Manju Seth. Justin Thomas continues to stay with me on this show.